That was on repeat for some reason. Anyway, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham. I hope everybody is doing well, and I hope everybody can see the stream, actually. Yeah, we're having problems with YouTube again. Oh, dear. So I'm hoping that this is working as it should be. Okay, looks like it probably is. Welcome to Sunday. Yeah, it is. We're good. We're good. It's just me. All right. For whatever reason, it appears there is a bug in YouTube Studio that when you go live, everything looks like it's live, but it doesn't show any viewers, and it doesn't show that you are connected. It is now doing it, but it seems to take an absolute age to do it. I don't know what's going on. So it looks like it's a bug in YouTube Studio, which I need to report. But yeah, it's weird. You know, in like 5.5 years, nearly 300 shows. This is like the first time that I've had repeatedly every time I go live a problem with actually going live. It's weird. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, we've only got like 9 people here, which is a bit of a shame. So this could be a short show. Hopefully not. Hopefully more people will pile in, just like they did on Wednesday. We had 25 people on Wednesday, which was awesome. And we had a whole bunch of really, really great questions, which was equally awesome. And I'm very pleased at not only the attendance, but the quality of the questions as well. It was great. So I hope everybody has had a great few days. I don't know why my theme tune was on repeat, but it shouldn't have been. So I've fixed that now. Anyway, I hope everybody has had a great few days and has had a fantastic weekend so far. It's been a glorious weekend here. Absolutely outstanding weather. It's been lovely. And so I've been out and about at least a little bit. Not very much because my leg is still not in perfect health. So, you know, I have to curtail what I do. But yeah, it was nice to just get out and about and get some fresh air and get out of this room instead of spending all my time in here. So that's been nice. So I hope everybody has had a great week and a great weekend so far. And we got a couple of questions in here already. So we will get to those questions in just a moment. Ronald Fagura has a good one. And Radio Tuck Frumpet, that's my good friend Keith, also has a good one. So if you have a question, get it into the chat. If you are not subscribed, you won't have access to the chat yet. So you will need to hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell, select all notifications, give it 5 minutes, and you will have access to the chat. So if you have a question, please type at Jonny Lipsham Studios to start with, and then ask your question. The reason why I ask you to do that is because for me, in the chat, it highlights my name in red, and that way I can separate questions that you have for me from just your general chat amongst yourselves, which is fine. I absolutely love it. You guys getting to know each other and talking amongst yourselves, that's great. It just helps, you know, kind of build a nice community, which is what this is all about. This is all about building community, and I love that. So I don't want to stop that, but just make sure that you do type at Jonny Lipsham Studios. Once you start typing it, it should auto-fill it for you, and then add your question after that. That would really help me make sure I don't miss your question. Okay? So please do that. And that was one of those sentences that had do in it, which always entertains me because I'm immature. All right, so who do we have in the door first? Of course, it was Billy Morgan. He is pretty much always early these days, which is great because he is very, very attentive. And we have Keith at Radio Trumpet. We also have Ronald Figura. We have John Hawk. We have Kyle Trajuziak. We have my sponsor, Alps Media LLC here. We have Don Oliver. We have United Effects over in Montreal. And we have Just Bob, who is here as well. He says, I can only part watch the snow. I'll start it again. I can only watch part of the show tonight. Wife and I are about to eat some dinner and watch a movie. There you go. Awesome. Fantastic. You go and enjoy yourself. Have a great time. And I hope it's a good film as well. Old School Funk and Soul is here as well, down in Birmingham, which is not too far away from where my friend Rich Cresswell lives, who is also here. And we have Secret Squirrel as well, who is here, which is great. And like I said, Rich Cresswell is also here. Paul Morgan is here. And Old School Funk and Soul. And he has a question about Studio One maintenance update as well. So, all right, let's get into questions whilst we have a couple here. So, Keith's question is a big one. I'm not sure I can answer it in one show, and it's probably more a question for the songwriting show than it is for Sunday Night Live, which is more about Studio One and mixing and mastering and those kind of things. But regardless, he says the development of national anthems, their roots in history. Well, some national anthems are really, really amazing pieces of music in their own right. Some of them are very, very old. Some of them are quite modern. And in fact, there are some countries where they have had an anthem for many, many centuries, and then they just decide, hey, let's have a new one. And so they've done that, and they've launched a brand new national anthem, new lyrics, new music, the works, and they sound pretty good. There are some really, really good national anthems that have a really nice melody. And of course, they're sung in different languages naturally. So I don't necessarily know what the lyrics are and what they're about and everything. But certainly from a musical point of view, there are some really, really good national anthems with a great melody, a really interesting melody, and some interesting chord changes. Among those, I personally would say is the German national anthem. It has a really interesting melody. The French national anthem also has a very interesting melody. And is quite strident as well. And Star Spangled Banner from the United States is another very interesting song. The reason why I personally think it's really interesting is that it changes key several times throughout its song. It does go from tonic to dominant, dominant to tonic, tonic to dominant, dominant to tonic, and then it has a rising sequence as you get to the climax of the anthem, which is very interesting. You don't see rising sequences. What's a rising sequence? Well, this is a rising sequence. Okay, that's a rising sequence. It's where you take a melody and then you transpose it up. So, albeit you're changing, sometimes you change key, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you stay within the key of your song. So you get those quite a bit, which makes them very interesting. Some of the African national anthems are also really interesting musically as well. Well worth checking out. Now, for some of my British friends like Rich and Old School Funk and Soul, you're probably wondering, hey, why have you not mentioned ours yet? Well, the UK national anthem is okay. It's not that great from a musical point of view. I'm not speaking at all politically or nationalistically, but from a musical point of view, it's not the best written melody, to be honest. It's a little bit plain, a little bit uninspiring. However, it can be made to be inspiring with a good performance, with a good arrangement. Of which there are several really good arrangements. There was one done recently. I forget the event that it was done for, but it was a fantastic arrangement with some new chord changes, some new harmonization, some new orchestration that just really gave the melody, a fresh lick of paint, and made it sound really good. So yeah, it can be jazzed up a bit in that respect, without it being jazzy, of course. But the UK has several regional national anthems because the United Kingdom is made up of 4 nations within its union. So you have England, you have Scotland, you have Wales, you also have Northern Ireland. So each one of those has their own kind of national anthem. Some of them are more interesting than others. The Scottish national anthem, O Flower of Scotland, I'm not really going to say very much about that because I personally don't like it. And I'm Scottish, and I'm very proudly Scottish. I just don't like it. It's an okay song-ish. I mean, the lyrics are kind of based out of historical events, which is fine. Most national anthems are, but the melody, And then there's the English one, which is actually a really interesting piece, and I'm trying to remember who composed it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's actually a very interesting melody, actually. And then the Welsh national anthem is probably one of the better ones in the whole world, I think. All right, so there we go. National anthems. Interesting. All right, so Ronald's question: creating labels in the arranger track, using paint tool to draw them in. They are not snapping to the grid on initial entry. Let's test that out. So let's do that. If you just bear with me one moment, and we'll get the arranger track open. And once I've done that, I will share the screen. So we're going over to there now, and there's me in the bottom corner. All right, so let's go and grab the old pencil tool thing, and let's draw something in, shall we? Let's say there, that seemed to snap to the grid. Yep, no problem. You've got to make sure the snap is on, and when you have snap on, you've got to make sure that snap is adaptive, and also that it's snap to grid and not snap to cursor or loop or snap event or relative grid or any of these. Make sure you have the snap value set correctly, and then it will snap. So I cannot reproduce that issue. So yeah, make sure that it is adaptive. Why do we need adaptive? Well, quite simple. You know, when you're at a different zoom state, you want to make sure that you can always snap to the grid value, whatever that might be. So as you can see, when you zoom in, you can also zoom in the values. So this is the downbeat of bar 17, and then we have a 16th note. Well, that's a 16th note there. That's a 16th note there. Oh no, these are beats. Sorry, apologies. That is beat 2. That is beat 3. That is beat 4, and these here are 16th notes in between each beat. If I zoom in more, you can get different values. And then when you zoom out, as you can see, the timeline ruler zooms out as well. So now it's 1, 9, 17, and 25. But when we zoom in further, you get to individual beats and then subdivisions of beats. So you want to make sure that you've got the snap set to adaptive. And then, yeah. So that's what I suggest you do. And we're going to change this name here. We'll just call this head 1. I know. And then we'll change this one to head 2, because this is a jazz piece. So drawing these in seems to not really be a problem. So let's just check here. Okay. Yep. They're all snapping to the line. Yep, everything's right on the line there. So I cannot reproduce that issue, I'm afraid. So you probably want to check your snap settings. in that particular case. But I'm glad we looked at it, and I'm glad we kind of tested that as well, just to be able to see and be sure. Ronald has a follow-up question, which I'm going to get to let's see. Old School Funk and Soul has a question. Secret Squirrel also has a two-part question, which I'll get to as well. But let me just address Ronald's follow-up question here, where he says, I thought there was an option to create arranger labels from markers. Yes, there is. There absolutely is. So, we can kind of delete all of these. And we can open the marker track as well. And we can move across. And right at the start here, in the marker track, we can say, let's say we put a marker down here. If I can remember, there's a shortcut for it, and I can't remember what it is. So let's put the cursor there, let's drop a marker there. Let's go to here, and we'll drop a marker there as well. And then we'll drop one here too. Okay. Now, I don't normally do this. So I have to now remember how you do it. Do you just drag that down? I can't remember. There you go, create a ranger section from marker. There you go, bingo. There you go, that's how you do it. So let me show you again. So, once you've got your markers in your song, you right click one of them and you select this option here, create arranger sections from markers. Boink, done. And then you can name them as you would like to. Okay? So that's all you do. Just select one of the markers, right click, choose, create arranger sections from markers. You can't see any of this. Sorry, that's my fault. Okay, let me show you one more time. I've muted myself. Sorry about that. All right, so take a look here. You can now see I've got these markers in the song here. Yeah, the screen is showing now. Sorry about that. All right, so you should be able to see all of these markers. So I've got the start, I've got one, I've got marker 2, marker 3, marker 4. All right, so if I select marker 2, I right click it, you get this option here. Create arranger sections from markers. Click that, boom, there's your arranger sections. Okay, yeah, you guys should be able to see it now, because I can see that I'm showing it. Yeah, you guys should be able to see the screen now, because I can see in OBS that it is showing. So you guys should be able to see it. All right, so hopefully you guys could see all of that. And I'm going to delete that. 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 So if I was to name these markers, so if I was to say head, all right, and then let's rename this one verse, or chorus 1. And then if I was to rename this one chorus 2. Okay, so now that I've named these markers, I can right click this one and I can choose create arranger section from markers. Done. All right, so that's how you do it. And of course you can change the colors. You can right click here and you can make that one red. You can right click this one. You can make that one whatever color you want. We can right click this one and we can make that color. And it's as easy as that. All right, so if you've got the snapping set to how I have, then you should be able to snap everything perfectly to the grid. One thing to check, however, is check that your timeline over here is set to bars. So right click and make sure it's set to bars and time linear. Okay? Time base, bars, quantize. And it doesn't really matter if you have it set to time linear or beat linear, but time linear is better for what you want to do. So make sure you've got those selected. If you've got this set to seconds, well, it might be a little bit different. You might find that when you try and put in another, let's say if I click here, let's say I want to draw in something new here. Let me just create a range right there. And let's say we put in another marker here at this point here. And then we create an arranger event from there. Now, when we put this back to bars, time base back to bars, now you'll see that this has not snapped to the bar line or to any beat. It's snapped to the seconds instead of beats. All right, so you got to make sure that you have this set correctly. Otherwise, it won't work. Okay? And for some reason that has gone doolally, when really that should be 25. There we go. Let's get rid of that. There we go. That's exactly how you do it. So hopefully, Ron, that helps you. Let's go up and get that other question. All right, Old School Funk and Soul had a question, and then I'm going to get to Secret Squirrel's question. He says, Johnny Guy talked yesterday on his meetup about Studio One maintenance update. Can you explain more? Well, maintenance updates. What are maintenance updates? We do these regularly. We have done these forever. So anytime you see something like 5.5.1 or 5.5.2, those are maintenance updates. What that means is it's a batch of bug fixes for the most part, and maybe there are one or two small features that might be added to it as well. But that's what a maintenance update is. So, for example, 6.6.1 is a maintenance update to 6.1. Okay? And what was in 6.6.1? Sorry, 6.1.1. What was in that? Mostly a bunch of bug fixes. And then a couple of cosmetic changes were added. And that was by and largely it. There wasn't a whole lot added to 6.1.1 because they're not feature updates. They are maintenance updates. It's designed to maintain the software, make sure that everything is running correctly. And then when people submit support tickets to report a bug, and if they are verified by tech support, they get bumped over to QA. QA tests them. When they verify it as well, it gets bumped over to the developers, and then they fix it, and then they bump it back to QA. QA test it, and then they bump it back to developers and say, this is good, it's fixed, and then they add it to the next maintenance update, or a maintenance update. It might not immediately get added to the next one. It might be a maintenance update further down the line. It depends. Sometimes they run out of time because there's always a schedule, there's a timeline for things. So essentially that's what maintenance updates are. And so they get released pretty regularly. Every few weeks, there's a maintenance update of some kind. But yeah, that's all I can say about them. I can't really talk about the contents. I can't talk about what's coming, what's not coming. I'm not allowed to. All I can tell you is that a maintenance update is something that we do regularly. And they get pushed out fairly regularly. But yeah, I can't really speak to what's coming in it though. All right, Secret Squirrel says, 2 questions. 1, does Notion have an audio capture feature? I'm not sure what you mean by an audio capture feature. Not sure what that means. If you're asking by that you're asking, does Notion convert audio into notation? No, it does not. It has never done that, and it probably never will. To be honest. Second question, any known simple intended to take simple humming and translate to MIDI as part of core function out to instrument? You can do that already. That's something you can already do in Studio One. And then you can send it to Notion. You can't do it in Notion because there is no way to record audio into Notion. It's not a DAW. It's a notation scoring software. That's what Notion is. It's not a DAW. It's just a notation scoring program. So what you can do in Studio One, let's go back over here for a second, is I can create a new song. And I can create a track for my vocal, like that. And I can set this to record. And then I can record something. Do 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 do. Something simple like that. Do 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 do. All right. And then what I can do is I can go and grab an instrument like presence. And then we can change this to, say, a piano sound. All right. Now, how am I going to get audio to MIDI? Well, that's kind of the challenge. First thing you do is you do edit with Melodyne. And then we go across and we locate where those notes are. And I'm going to select here, I'm going to do Control A. And I am going to use the correct pitch macro. I'm going to center everything. And I'm going to do that as well. Okay, and then having done that, I'm going to close the editor. And I'm going to drag and drop this down. And then I'm going to mute this. Now let's compare that to the other track. Spot on. It's pretty much exactly what I did. Now, I can change some of the lengths of these. So I can make that short. And for some reason it added an extra note there. It must have thought that it heard an extra note, which it didn't. And that's too long. Oops. And I think it's heard that as one note rather than two. And that's fine. I could split this if I wanted to. You know, I could grab the knife tool and I could split that. But it's other, you know, that's kind of nitpicking. And then we can go over to score here. Now, I didn't use a click, so the notation values are going to be all over the place. But ostensibly, I could now send this to Notion and away you go. You don't have to do that. unless you want to do further editing in the notation, or you want to use the Notion sound library, which you might want to do. So if you want to use the Notion sound library, or you want to do further notation editing that you cannot do here in the score editor, then go ahead, send it to Notion. And the way you do that is you'd go File, no, sorry, not File, Song, Send to Notion. And then when you click on that, I have Notion Mobile on the Mac. I also have Notion on the PC, but because it's not open, it's not seeing it. That's fine. But then you just say send note data of entire song or send note data of selected tracks. So I've only got the one track here, and then merge it into an open document, and then you just hit send. I'm not going to do that. I could just launch Notion on this computer as well, and then it would send it straight to Notion on this computer. I'm not going to do that. But that is essentially how you would do that. Now, if you are happy with how it works out in here, let's imagine this is kind of a little bit of a bass part. You could just print this out. So you could hit print here, your print dialog will open up, and it'll send to your printer. You can open up, it'll spit it out for you. You can hand that to your bass player and say, there you go, that's the part I want you to play. And that actually doesn't take a whole lot of time. You know, most bass players are pretty good that you can just sing the part and they will be able to play it for you without having to have the notation. But, you know, there may be the odd occasion where this is going to be valuable. Also, if you've got a melody that you don't know how to write, you don't know kind of what the pitches are, you're not really sure, and you're not really sure what the rhythmic values of the notes are, you can do this. You can sing it into Studio One. Make sure you got the click on though, and make sure you're singing to that click track, and then you will get much more sensible notation values than what we've got here. But that's essentially how you do it. As I said, a few more steps involved, but there's no way to record audio into Notion because Notion is not a DAW, it's scoring software. Okay? So I hope that answers both of your questions there, Secret Squirrel. It's a good question though. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, we've got loads of questions here. Although loads of people actually trying to get my attention. Ronald says, I have those settings. It's creating them a bar before or after where my paint tool is pointing. That's strange because I cannot reproduce that. You saw it kind of just worked for me. But you know, we can test it again in this new song. I was using an existing song, so okay, let's just double check it here. Why not? Let's go get the pencil tool here and let's just draw that one in there. That worked. That worked. That worked. All I'm doing is I'm just literally pointing and clicking. I'm not really dragging anything. I'm just pointing and clicking. And it's giving me all these automatically generated options, but I can keep clicking. And as you can see, it keeps going. So just make sure that your pointer or the pencil, because that's really what you should be using rather than the pointer, your pencil is right on the line. Because if you do it like somewhere in between, as you can see there, if I do it there, if I point in between, look, it's not going to do it if I point it in between. Okay, so you got to make sure you've got the pointer in the right spot, right on the line, otherwise it doesn't work. Okay. All right, so I hope that answers that. Let's see, what else do we have? United Effects says, could you suggest mic placement for recording acoustic guitar? I don't have many mics. A pair of condenser mics, Carvin CM87S, a Dynamic Audio Technica, and a couple of PZMs. Okay, if you're talking, I'm assuming here you're talking about uh, you're talking about acoustic guitar. If you're talking about acoustic guitar, let's go back to the lounge. If you're talking about acoustic guitar, then there are a couple of things you need to do. First of all, if you're multi-miking anything, so that's acoustic guitar, that's drums, whatever it is, you got to make sure that those microphones are in phase with each other. Okay? So that means they need to be the same distance away from the source. So if you're recording with two microphones, for example, if you're recording, there's a couple of different ways you can set this up. You can do a spaced pair, where one is kind of more towards the neck of the instrument, the other one's more towards the bridge of the instrument. Make sure they are exactly the same distance away from the instrument. Okay, so 18 inches away from the neck, 18 inches away from the bridge. Okay, make sure they are exactly the same distance from the instrument. Why is this important? Because if you have mics at different distances, then the sound is going to hit one mic before it hits the other one. And when that happens, you're going to start to get phase cancellation between the two microphones. Okay? And when that happens, you'll start to get weird sound happening. It will sound either like the bit rate is wrong, which it isn't, or it'll sound really, really thin. And you'll just start messing about with EQ and going, I can't get this to sound full and round. Well, it's probably not an EQ thing. It's probably that the mics are out of phase with each other. Try flipping the phase using the phase inverter in Studio One, and it's just literally a click of a button to do that, and see if that affects the sound. If suddenly it goes nice and full, then you know it's a phase problem, that the two microphones were out of phase with each other. So to avoid that, get it right at the source. Get those microphones at exactly the same distance away from the instrument. So you can do that spaced pair thing where you got one over the neck, one over the kind of towards the bridge and the butt end of the guitar. And they'll be capturing two different sounds of the guitar. Okay? But so long as they're in phase with each other, you'll still get a good overall sound. Another thing you can do is you can have them basically right adjacent to each other. Okay, pointing at the same part of the guitar, kind of adjacent to each other. All right, and you can get one of those brackets that will mount the two microphones next to each other. Okay, to do that. And again, you want to make sure the capsules of the two microphones are exactly lined up with each other, so that again, you're not going to encounter any phase problems. And then, of course, there's XY configuration. And this is where you mount one mic over the top of the other, so the capsules are crossed over each other like this. And it kind of makes it an X kind of configuration, okay? And when you do this, the two mics are going to be pointing away from each other. One's going to be pointing this way, one's going to be pointing this way, but the two capsules need to be on directly over each other. So again, the phase relationship is between the two microphones is retained. If you're going to do this, point the microphone, and the same with the adjacent microphones, make sure that they are not pointing directly at the sound hole of the guitar. Point them towards maybe the 14th or 16th fret of the instrument, somewhere between fret 12 and fret 16 of the instrument, looking towards the body of the guitar, looking towards the sound hole of the guitar, but not pointed directly at it, okay? If you point a microphone directly at the sound hole, you will get an absolute megaton of low end. You don't want that. It will sound horrible, and there is no way to fix it. Trust me, I have been there. I have recorded something that is way too boomy, and it sounds horrible, and the only thing you can do is re-record, reposition the microphone. Okay? So experiment, do some test recordings, and instead of, trying to fix it in the mix with EQ, try and fix how the guitar sounds with microphone placement, and if necessary, change the position of the guitar as it relates to the microphone as well. So a combination of where you put the mics, where you put the guitar, Do this little dance until you find that sweet spot where you go, yes, that sounds perfect. That's what I want. That's how I want it to sound. And that way you're fixing the EQ of the acoustic guitar without using a plugin. You're doing it at the source. You're getting it right at the source, which is what you want to do. And again, make sure your microphones are in phase with each other. It's really important. That is the inherent risk of multi-miking anything, is phase. So if you're just using one microphone, then you don't have that problem, because it's literally one capsule in front of the instrument. And so the sound is only going to hit that, and that's it. That's all you got. So if you are then adding other microphones to capture the sound, like room mics, so they may be about 20 feet away, or, further down the hall, if you've got a nice big auditorium and you want to capture not only the close mic guitar, but further back mics and like auditorium mics to capture the reverberation of the whole room, those mics don't need to be in phase with the guitar, but they do need to be in phase with each other. So if you've got a pair of microphones that are right at the back of the room, make sure they're exactly the same distance away from the guitar as the other mic. Okay? So the sound is still going to hit those two microphones at the back of the room at the same time. All right? So phase relationship matters whether they are close mic'd, middle distant mic'd, or far away. You need to make sure that those microphones are in exact alignment so that the sound hits those two microphones at exactly the same time. Okay? Very important that you do that. But once you got that, you should be good. That's a good question. I like that. Just Bob says, if you share a song in Sphere and you recorded using seconds, not bars, when Collaborator uploads and uses bars, does it line up correctly, or do you need to switch to bars? Decide what you're going to use when you start. Okay? Because if you line everything up to seconds, it's not going to line up to bars, because bars are not the same unit of measurement as seconds are. It's the same as trying to line something up in inches to centimeters. They don't quite line up because an inch is not the same as a centimeter. So they're never going to match. So if you make a mark on a ruler at 1 centimeter and then another mark 10 centimeters down, and then you say, okay, and then you send that sheet to the next person and say, hey, line that up, and maybe they don't use centimeters, maybe they use inches, maybe that's their unit of measurement that they prefer. And they put the same ruler on, but this time it's flipped over, so they're measuring in inches. They're going to say, hey, these don't line up. You've done it wrong. They don't line up. No, you haven't done it wrong. You're just using a different unit of measurement. So in the same way, bars and beats are a different unit of measurement of time than seconds are, or frames. So decide first, before you start, which you're going to use. Are you going to use bars and beats, or are you going to use seconds? If you're going to use seconds, make sure that that's agreed, and make sure that everybody has the same timeline settings. Now, the cool thing is, in Studio One, you can have more than one ruler. So you can have a ruler for seconds, you can have a ruler for bars. So, you can correlate which is which. For example, let's go over to Studio One again. So if I was to hit this here and click on ruler, this will open a second ruler. And as you can see, this one defaults to seconds. So here you have the measurements in bars, and below you have the measurements in seconds at this tempo, 120 beats per minute. Okay. Now you can see here that 5 seconds is roughly 3 bars and 2 beats. You can see it lines up there. 10 seconds lines up very nicely with the downbeat of bar 6. And again, 8 bars and 2 beats. And I'm pretty sure if you go down, you'll see that this same pattern kind of occurs. Every sort of 5 seconds, it's like in between, and then it's on, and then it's in between, and then it's on down the line. So if, for example, one of you is working in seconds, and they line everything up to say, hey, this hit happens at 15 seconds. You can have your own ruler that opens up, and you know that that is bar 8, beat 3. And you need to, let's say one of you is playing a piano chord, and the other in your collaboration team is playing a bass note, and you need to hit at exactly the same point. And your guy who works in seconds says, hey, I made my hit at 15 seconds. You can go, okay, that's bar 8, beat 3. So you do your count off, 7, 2, 3, 4, 8, 2, boom. And now your 2 parts line up. Okay, so you can use that, but I wouldn't recommend working this way because it will get confusing. I recommend you either choose bars and everybody works with bars and beats, or you use seconds and everybody works with seconds. But you got to bear in mind that when we're dealing with music, yeah, you can be working with seconds, but you got to remember that the mark for each second does not equal the mark for each beat unless you have the tempo set to 60 beats per minute. If you have the tempo set to 60 beats a minute, seconds will line up with beats perfectly. Now in this case, with 120 beats a minute, you can see a pattern. But if you've got an odd number down here, like 137, or 137.6 beats per minute. And trust me, there's a lot of songs out there that's what they have. They have an odd tempo. It's not exactly 137 beats a minute. It's 137.4 beats a minute or something like that. And there are reasons why music producers work like that. They have a decimal point of a tempo. Don't ask me why they do it, but they do it for reasons. Sometimes it's to make sure that the piece of music fits to a music video, and the music video has to be exactly 3 minutes and 29.25 seconds long. So they set the tempo to make sure that the whole song fits to exactly that amount of time. All right? So if you're working in, if you're recording and you're songwriting together, you're doing the arranging together, do that in bars and beats. It'll be so much easier for you. And then if one of your collaborator members is a mix engineer, they're mixing. They don't need to worry about bars and beats. They can do it all in seconds if they want to, because they're not worried about bars and beats. All they're worried about is EQ settings, compression settings, panning, phase, all of that kind of stuff, reverbs, delays. That's what they're concerned about. They're not concerned about, is this in time or not? Unless they're doing a little bit of editing for you, in which case, bars and beats again. Do all the editing in bars and beats, flip it over to seconds for mixing and mastering if you really must. But that's what I would say with that. Just Bob is that is a great question. I hope that helps you. We got 10 minutes left, so let me see. I've answered United Effects question about guitar. Ronald says it's operator error. He says works fine outside of the events past the end of the song. It might have something to do with the fact that I used Melodyne to tempo map the song. Entirely possible. Entirely possible. Shorty Beard is here. Awesome. You arrived with 10 minutes left of the show, my friend. But I'm glad you're here nonetheless. Thank you for coming. That's awesome. I appreciate you guys a lot. Let's see, where do we peak at? We peaked at 18. That is low for a Sunday Night Live. We normally peak way above that. Yeah, that's a little bit disappointing. Mind you, I did advertise this a little bit late, so that's probably on me. But yeah. I'm a little disappointed by that, but that's okay. All right, do we have any further questions, guys? Let's see. I'm going to go back up and do a double check and make sure I've not missed anything. Secret Squirrel says, fair enough, I was asking about Notion's audio capture in order to hum parts of arrangements whilst on the go. I'm basically looking for an excuse to buy an iPad. iPads are great, and there is a version of Notion that works on the iPad that also works on PC and Mac and Android and Chromebook as well. It's called Notion Mobile. It's fantastic. It has some awesome features that Notion 6 does not have, which is really cool. One of which is to transmit. Now, yes, you can send from Notion to Studio One and from Studio One to Notion with Notion 6. Yes, but with Notion Mobile, you can transmit from one machine to another. So, for example, here is my iPad Pro. I can be working on a score on the train on my iPad Pro. I can get home and say, hey, I want to finish this on my PC. In Notion Mobile, there is a feature. It's part of the feature bundle, which is the in-app purchase for Notion Mobile. You buy that, or you sign into Notion Mobile with PersonaSphere, and that is unlocked for you. And you can transmit directly over the network to Notion on your PC or Notion on your Mac. Dead easy. And you can also send to Studio One. So I can work on a score in here. I can go, heck, this is ready. This is ready for mixing. And I can transmit the whole darn thing to Studio One, either on my PC or my Mac. And then I can assign all the sounds that I want with, say, Opus or BBC Symphony Orchestra or whatever I've got for orchestral sounds on my PC. I can just go through, quickly assign all of those sounds, and then I can start mixing. Because all of my scoring is done. It's done on here, and I can just transmit it. And it's instant, just like that. There's no waiting for it to happen. It happens over the network. You've got to make sure that all of your devices that you're using Notion Mobile on are all on the same network. Okay? But it works. It's brilliant. I love it. Plus, with the Apple Pencil 2, you can handwrite directly into Notion. It's very, very cool. I highly recommend it. And the app is fundamentally free. It's just the in-app purchase that isn't. But if you're a PersonaSphere member, like I said, you can sign into Notion Mobile with your PersonaSphere membership, and it will unlock all the expansion sounds and the handwriting tool and a bunch of other, special functions that are going to be coming in the future. There you go. I have advertised for Personas for Notion Mobile. There you go. So, Billy Morgan has a question. Who was the first songwriter in history? Hint, he was also a king. The first songwriter in history, I think I know who you're thinking of, and you're thinking of King David. However, he was probably not the first recorded songwriter in history. But certainly of antiquity, he is probably the most well-known songwriter in history, but he was not the first songwriter in antiquity. There is documentary evidence, written evidence, of songwriters that predates King David by probably about 4,000 years. And where are you going to find that? You'll find that in Egypt. Egyptian culture, during the imperial Egyptian period, so we're talking about the dynastic period, was actually an incredibly vibrant and incredibly musical culture, which is largely why they were so incredibly powerful as a country. Before they encountered the Romans, and then kind of the Romans, they kind of had a bit of an alliance with Egypt, and it all kind of went a bit bad, and the Roman Empire started to fall apart. And when that happened, also the Egyptian Empire kind of all started to go a bit wrong as well, because Alexander the Great came and swept it all away, and that's kind of history lesson. But in Egyptian history, there are songs. We have lyrics of songs from 4,000 or 5,000 years before King David. And they were written on stone tablets. and we have them in hieroglyphic form. It's taken a long time for them to be translated into English. They don't quite translate to modern English particularly well, so some of it is kind of lost in translation a wee bit, but there is definitely a form and a structure to these ancient Egyptian songs. And because with these tablets, there are pictures and paintings of musical instruments being played, we can probably get some idea of maybe what the music might have sounded like. There were definitely trumpets involved. Trumpets were a big thing in Egypt. And a certain type of harp, not the same as the harp that King David used, but it's similar. It's actually a little bit smaller, has a much smaller musical range, only has a range of about an octave and half a tone, because tuning for this ancient Egyptian harp is not exact. But this is something that is actually well known and is being studied even as we speak. But yes, maybe was Homer, the Greek writer, not also a songwriter? He was a poet. We don't know whether he actually wrote songs that were to be sung, but he certainly wrote verse. We do know that. And he also wrote stories and novels as well, but and plays. But we don't know for certain whether he actually wrote songs to be sung. But yeah, King David is what Billy was thinking of. Yeah, as I said, there are Greek and Egyptian songwriters that predate King David for sure. But yeah, so there you go. I one of the things I studied at university, one of my university degrees actually was in music history. So there you go. But good question. But yeah, King David is probably one of the better known songwriters of antiquity. And actually, the thing about those songs in the book of Psalms is sometimes at the top of some of those songs, before the song actually starts, there are instructions given to the musical director to suggest what instruments should be accompanying this song. Like, for example, there's one psalm where it says very, very clearly to be played on harps. It doesn't say single harp, it says plural harps. We don't know how many harps were involved, but it certainly says to be played with harps and tambourine. So there was meant to be a tambourine rhythmic accompaniment to this harp music. And then when you read the Hebrew of those psalms, there is a clear meter and a clear rhythm to the words. So musicologists have figured out what his songs would have sounded like back then. So obviously there's no audio recording, you can't record, so basically it's taking a very, very educated guess as to what those songs would have sounded like. We have some idea of what form and structure of music was like in the ancient Israeli period, that Old Testament biblical time, but we don't really know a whole lot about what was their tonality, what were common rhythms for dancing and that kind of thing. We don't really know a whole lot about that. So some of it is guesswork, but some of it is also written evidence from what music sounded like, that is not necessarily biblical. It's extra biblical from writers that were around at the time, who witnessed the same kind of things, the same kind of events. So they would have heard what music was like, and they would have written down what it sounded like. So we got some ideas, but like most things, we can't be 100% sure exactly of what it would have sounded like. Certainly in terms of its intonation and its tonality, because there was no kind of agreed sense of tuning like there is now. So there's a lot of things that would sound. Ancient music to us in the 21st century would sound very, very weird and probably not very tuneful or very in tune, because there was no real agreed principle of tuning back then like we have now. So there we go. Radio Talk Front says, don't forget the ceremonial goat sacrifice orchestral section. Yes, orchestral heavy metal. That's probably what that was. All right, we are out of time, folks. Thanks a lot for all your great questions. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for coming. As I said, we peaked at about 18, which is a little bit low for us, but who knows? Hopefully we'll pick up as the weeks go by. I certainly hope so. But other than that, folks, I'm going to bid you all a very good night, and I will see you on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified. Until then, folks, take care and have a very, very good night and a very good start to your week. Good night, everybody.